The tunnel I've just walked through was created back in the days when this used to be a working railway line. The railway line, even though it did bring tourists to the area, its main purpose though was actually for the industry, and along here there were a whole load of bobbin mills, and this tunnel is aptly named the Bobbin Mill Tunnel. Once that industry really fell into decline and then the factories ended up closing, the railways were no longer needed and they backfilled this tunnel. So in order for tourists in a more modern day to be able to get along this disused railway line, they had to come up with some other solution. So they built this boardwalk along the side. And I've actually done this Latrigg walk before back in 2019 with a couple of friends. And I distinctly remember going along that boardwalk. However, it had become very damaged back in 2015 when there were quite severe storms and Keswick got really badly flooded. And I'm guessing that they'd just given it a temporary fix, and then they were able to get funding to be able to clear all of that earth that had been backfilled in the tunnel, because a year after I last did this walk, that tunnel then reopened. And it's actually really quite pleasant. It's not like a lot of tunnels that you go through. It's really well lit and very clean. The old railway line takes you past the Low Briery Holiday Park, but originally this is where the Low Briery Bobbin Mill existed, and they did have a railway platform where some of the trains stopped especially so that workers could get off to go to work. The workers would get off on the up trains on a morning and then they could go back home on the down trains at the end of the day. Those trains operated Monday through to Saturday. There's loads of information plaques that are placed along this old railway line, which is letting us know all about the history of this place. And what we found out is that the bobbins that were created in these mills were actually designed in different ways depending on what was to be spun around them. So the cotton ones were different to the silk ones, for example. They also made bobbins that would create the thread that would go through the old £1 note bills. Another one of the signposts has let us know that the River Greta here is home to brown trout, and so quite a lot of people go fishing in this area. And I believe the type of fishing that they do is what's known as fly fishing. I have, however, just spotted a sign that's saying that it's for people who are part of like the Anglers Association only. So I guess you would have to pay a fee to be able to fish here. But also as we crossed over the bridge, we've seen yet another heron. We got to see one a couple of days ago when we did the Latrigg walk, and that one was so much more active. But this one I think was a good sign just to show that, yeah, there definitely are fish in this area. They've also talked about how there's otters around here too, but we've not seen any sign of those guys. And where the heron was, there were a few dragonflies flying around. A dragonfly swooped up and ate a fly, which I've never seen before. There's been a few parts along the trail a little bit like this where you can see the crazy amounts of erosion that's happened along the side of the rivers when that flood happened in 2015. And if you look at how high up that erosion is in comparison to where I'm stood at the moment, and the pasture just behind me, it says to me that all of this must be completely flooded, and yet even with the water being able to spill out this far, it was still too much that it was able just to wrench so much of the earth off of the side of the riverbed. We've come off of the railway trail. We've started to go uphill, which obviously is needed in order for us to get to the top of Latrigg. So that unfortunately means that all of the information plaques are now going to end. But there were about 3 of them all stacked up just as we were exiting there. And one of the fascinating things that I learned is that after the floods, businesses reported that they were making a loss of about 14% in comparison to previous years. That accounted for about £2 million within the local business economy. So it was obvious to people that it was a priority that they needed to get the trail fixed. And as a temporary solution, people did find other ways of being able to get around the parts that were destroyed, such as like the bridges, for example. This is obviously why we'd been able to do it back in 2019. Now when we did it, I remember going through like woodland forested walks, and one of the comments that this sign was talking about was saying that people who were wheelchair users or people who were trying to get from A to B using strollers or even cyclists just weren't able to use these alternative trails. And so when they planned what they were going to do to fix it all, one of the really big things was trying to make sure that they kept cyclists happy, wheelchair users happy, runners, cyclists, you name it. And it's really just quite fascinating to see how it's all come together. And I think that all of the information boards have been brilliant. I love a walk like this. Skiddaw, 4 miles. We're not going there. We've definitely missed the sunset from the top of Skiddaw. These sheep have hands down got to be some of the most curious that we have come across in our hiking in the UK. So we're coming up Latrigg and the sun started to come out from behind like a really big grey cloud, and so I stopped and I put my bag down to get out my sunglasses. I think because we're not doing the normal thing of just hiking on through or running on through, because the trail runners and hikers usually using this path, they've all just kind of been a bit like, oh, what's going on? And they've all just like hung around and they're kind of like watching us, and I think they're just about as curious as what we are right now. As always, if you're watching this video because you are also planning on doing this hike, one thing to note is that when you come through that farmer's gate back there, the most obvious track is for a tractor or some kind of farm vehicle, and we've just got to make the mistake of going off on that. But then very faintly off to the left hand side going upwards is the footpath that you actually need to go to Latrigg, so just keep an eye out for that one. Even before you get to the top, the views are pretty awesome. Out to my right hand side, you can see the squiggly path that goes up Skiddaw. It starts off green and then gets up into the purple heather. And then off onto my left hand side, we can actually see a lot of the flat farmers' pastures that we were wandering through and the campsite that we wandered past after we visited the stone circle this morning. Don't think we're quite at a point where we can see that stone circle. And then just kind of off to sort of in front of me, but off to my left hand side, you can just start to see Derwent water peeking through too. This rock will do, highest point. Hey! We've made it to the top of Latrigg, but unfortunately there's no kind of trig point or cairn marker, so we figured that this rock will just have to do. We've dipped down just a little bit and there's this bench which is gorgeously situated, looking out over things like Derwent water, Bass water. You've got the green pastures in between the two, and then on either side of Derwent water you can see things like Walla Crag and Cat Bells, and when I look in the other direction you've got Skiddaw too. The blood has stopped pumping because obviously we're not climbing upwards now, and so the coldness is really starting to set in, and I think it doesn't help that there's a bit of a breeze too, but there is no denying that the light and the glow that is going on right now is truly stunning, and I think worth the feeling of cold. We're going to now slowly make our way back down towards Keswick, and I guess we'll just kind of see how it goes with the light. We both brought our headlamps just in case it does get so dark that we need them. when you're in Keswick looking up at Latrigg, it looks like the easterly side is a really nice gentle slope going up, and that's what we came up earlier on today. And then it looks like it's a very steep slope on the westerly side of it, but actually the trail has got these switchbacks, which makes it pretty nice just going down. It does mean that it's quite nice on the knees too. So just where the footpath through the forest meets the A66, I heard some kind of bird, but I said to Andy, I've just heard some kind of animal. So he got all up on high alert, and then what did you see?
A roe deer.
Which was awesome. But that definitely wasn't what I heard. And I think the fact that you had the hum of like all of the traffic going along the A66 probably helped our cause. And the deer maybe just wasn't quite as aware of us sneaking up on it, really.
Yeah, but it was amazing.
We're normally ones to get out really early, and so it's very unusual for us to do any kind of sunset hiking, and nighttime hiking has been an absolute first this evening. Because we're almost back at the apartment, I'm going to round this up now, but as always, if you guys have enjoyed this video, I'd be ever so grateful if you guys could give it a thumbs up, give it a like, and it just helps the video spread to others who might also enjoy it. And we will see you guys on our next adventures. Bye bye.